Friday night. We're a little late, but that's okay. We were having our pre-meeting meeting.
What are we gonna call it? The prequel?
Yeah, yeah. We have to make our game plan.
Exactly.
Oh, is it time to start complaining about how hot it is or what?
Oh, I know. So it's so funny today. I commuted on my bike today, and I got home and my wife's like, "So how was it?" I'm like, "I'm sweaty for the first time." Like really, I drank 2 bottles of water on the way home. I was sweaty, and I was like,
Oh,
"Okay, we're good. We're back at it." And it
yeah,
wasn't cold riding in this morning.
yeah. No, I love this time of year. Of course, the winds we could hold off on, but
Hmm.
I am looking forward to complaining about the heat a little bit.
Me
This
too.
winter has been a little bit long. Yeah, that's all right.
Yep, that's all right. So, hey, good job on the triathlon club race last week.
Yeah.
That was very successful, and everybody that came out and helped out and raced, congratulations to everybody.
Yeah.
That was a really super fun event. So that,
Yeah, you know what? It's neat how a lot of people help to put that on. And even the people who are racing, I mean,
yep,
they come early and help to set up and then they race. And then some people race and then hang out afterwards and help clean up. And I'll tell you, my little pitch is it's probably good to get there early, help to set up because that's a nice warm up. And then
yeah.
you're all ready to go.
No, I think, and honestly, I think it can maybe even help with your nerves a little bit too, right? Because
Yeah.
now you're concentrating on something else. And
Yeah. Yeah.
no, I think that it was really good. The water wasn't decent. It was 62, which
Yeah.
was not too terrible.
Hmm.
Um, you know, maybe my warmest open water swim this year.
Ah, there you go.
Speaking of which, John, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. I know it's a little off topic, but so Morro Bay, they're looking at a potential water temperature of 52 to 53.
Whoa, that is cold.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really cold. I've 56 is the coldest I've ever
yeah,
swum, and I
yeah,
got really
yeah,
cold.
yeah,
And I know we've talked about cold water swimming before, but man, I'm nervous already. Like
yeah.
it's 4 weeks away, and I'm like, man, how am I gonna handle 35 to 40 minutes in that temperature of water?
Yeah, anything under 55 starts to get really cold. And, you do need to, obviously, the cap. I know you've got a cap that you already like and wear, and that's good. The wetsuit, making sure you've got the thickest wetsuit that you can use
Yeah,
legally
that's I
is
have that.
important.
I just ordered booties. Zone
Good.
three's got there are two kinds of booties. They got the warmer ones and the not so warm ones. I ordered the warmest ones.
Okay.
Um, and then I think I got to really do a good job of warming up in my wetsuit
Yeah,
and
yeah.
getting my core temperature nice and warm before I go in. I think that'll hold a little bit,
Hmm.
even if I sweat into the wetsuit, like starting to warm up the
Hmm.
actual wetsuit. I think that's a good game plan. I got the earplugs,
Hmm.
the
Good.
wax
I
earplugs.
like that. Yeah.
Um,
So when
yeah.
you get cold in a swim, where do you feel the coldness starting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I feel it obviously in my face and hands
Yeah, yeah.
and feet.
Hmm.
But like when my core gets cold, I don't know if I really feel it anywhere. Just like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe
But not like water leaking in somewhere
no,
that is,
no, I don't.
well, on the face, you can actually try putting some Vaseline
Oh,
on
that's a good
it. I mean,
idea.
that's an English channel trick, is lube up with lard and and Vaseline.
Yeah.
That would be, yeah, what's that lard, that Crisco, right?
Crisco, yeah, get some
Yeah.
Crisco on my face.
You
Except for then if it's sunny out, then later I'll have a sunburn. But I'll be cooked.
you would literally be fried.
I'd literally be fried.
Well,
Exactly.
and you got plenty of, when is the race? It's
May 20th.
okay. So you've got some time to get down to even Willow Beach or even Lake Mead at this point to try
Yeah.
that out and see what it's like to have either Vaseline or some type of coating on your face, if that's where it starts, and which is very normal. I mean, when there's plenty of research on this cold water reflex that we have, this Huckleberry reflex, where if you put your face in the water, it can change the physiology really quickly because
Right.
there is the brain sensors ultimately in the brain that are saying, hey, you're going to be in a cold environment. Let's start doing things differently. And so if you can actually protect that face, that might actually be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm even starting to plan like what to wear on the bike, because
Yeah.
traditionally, like that time of year, it's foggy there
Mm,
on the coast.
okay.
And so getting out, if even if let's say it's 55 degrees
Yeah.
air temperature and it's not sunny.
Well, you just did that with Oceanside, and that
But
first 10
Oceanside was
miles was
sunny.
cold. Yeah, right. But
Yeah.
Oceanside, the water was cold and the air temperature was better than what you're going to have, and even then, you're still 10 miles into the race before you could really feel anything.
Yeah. So I'm actually thinking about putting like an actual cycling jersey, like
Yeah.
a long sleeve cycling jersey on
Yeah.
top of my tri-suit
Mm-hmm.
in T1. I
Hmm.
think that's like I have a black one, and I'm thinking
Yeah.
that, getting a little bit more heat that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a month out. I'm already thinking about it, but
Mm.
I think that that's prudent planning, right? Is like trying to
Yeah.
figure this stuff out now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I
Well,
do need to get down to Willow Beach a couple times to
yeah.
where,
It's a little colder, obviously, than Lake Mead. If Lake Mead's over 60 at this point, I mean,
yeah,
Willow Beach will be probably under 60, 58, 55 maybe.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, well, and the whole thing with the booties on the swim, I think the important part of that is when you put your shoes on and biking. And because once your feet are cold going into the bike, that's going to make cycling that much harder.
yeah, yeah. Not having feeling in your feet,
Yeah,
it actually does make cycling hard. Like we
yeah,
don't realize like how much, proprioception we have
exactly good.
in that
Yeah.
cycling shoe.
Hmm.
It's not just a dead thing that you just push, right?
Yeah,
There's actual feel.
yeah,
So yeah, I'm starting to, I'm literally starting to not worry. I'm not saying
yeah,
worry. I'm thinking plan. Like
yeah,
it's going to be cold for everybody,
yeah.
just the same. So, and then 3 weeks later, I'm doing Alcatraz. And so that'll be warm, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
it's supposed to be
That'll
55,
be nothing.
56.
Yeah. That'll be nothing at that point. So, oh, that's good. And
Yeah,
uh, you still do the normal things even in cold water in terms of wearing your kit underneath. But I like the idea of putting something on afterwards.
yeah,
And you already know this. I mean, but the good thing you'll have to practice putting it on while you're wet
yeah.
and
And I'm going to do that.
see.
I'm literally going to get in the shower
Yep.
with the jersey I'm going to wear, and then practice. The problem is when your hands are frozen,
Yeah, that's true.
how do you practice that? Like that's so
Hmm.
hard. Because you're never in an Ironman race or Ironman branded race. I did a bunch of research. You're never allowed to wear gloves in the swim.
Hmm. Hmm.
USAT rules allow you
Yeah.
to, on the race director's discretion.
Hmm.
Supposedly, an Ironman branded event, it's never
Yeah.
allowed.
Well, it's funny because you talk about hands cold. When I got out of the water at Oceanside, my zipper for my Aero jersey had come undone, and I leave that zipped up, but it popped during the swim, and so I'm getting out. I'm trying to do the zipper with cold hands, and you're right, that's not easy. And so anything you do to not have to use your hands afterwards is good. When I did Norseman, it was the same. 55-degree temp water, and we'd go through some cold water based on where the water's running into the ford, and I made the mistake of changing my gear coming out of my wetsuit to go off on the bike, and I didn't practice it ahead of time, and it was so hard to get my kit on, and then it was all wet anyhow.
It's gonna
So
make a difference.
it was really sort of silly.
Oh,
Uh,
goodness. Well, we're answering a lot of questions here.
we are, yeah, and that's what we're going to do tonight is talk about questions that pros are answering.
Yeah, yep. So you found this website called Any Question,
Yeah.
and there's a triathlon section in it, and people have posted questions, and professional triathletes have answered them.
Yeah.
And we thought it'd be fun if we read the questions and we answered them,
Yeah.
because obviously our answers should be different in a lot of these than the pro athletes. And I think
Mhm.
most of the people that listen to our podcast or watch our podcast are age groupers. So from our experiences, it's going to be, I think, quite different answers to these questions. So we're going to kick it off, and I'll ask you the first question.
Okay.
Um, what's your average heart rate during the run in a full Ironman?
I know this stuff. I mean, because you and I both like to go through data, especially after a race. I love going back and looking at everything from, the stride rate, stride length. I like looking at the vertical stuff. I like looking at heart rate. I like looking at power, anything that, we measure. I love going back and looking at and just sort of comparing even from year to year. So I know in my sprint race heart rate is in the high 140s, and that is red line for me. That's what I can sustain. A little bit lower on the bike when I'm doing a sprint race, maybe in the low 140s or even into the 130s at that point. For 70.3, my heart rate for the run will be right around 130 to 140. And then for an Ironman, my heart rate's lower than that, usually around 125 to 130. How about you?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like I have a really low heart rate until I talk to you.
Yeah.
I think, John, you have the lowest heart rate I've ever come across in triathletes, just people that I've talked to.
No.
So in a sprint race in the run, I'm 160.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In a half Ironman, I'm 150.
Right.
In a full Ironman, 135.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Well, and to your point, the actual heart rate is hard to compare between
You
people,
can't.
even you and me. I mean, you're looking at 160, I'm looking at high 140s. But what does that mean? That means my heart rate is my heart rate, your heart rate is your heart rate. And so there are ways to normalize it. You try to do it based upon max heart rate. My max heart rate, the last time I did it was just around 150 something. So I don't remember what it is. Do you remember what your max heart rate is?
Yeah, well, 2 years ago was the last time I hit it. And it was,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it was my max heart rate, or should have been, because I was doing this Zwift race and I didn't have a fan
Yeah.
and I went extra, extra hard and it went to 181.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
I've never seen that since.
Yeah.
177
Mm-hmm.
has been pretty much there. But I know given the right conditions and the right motivations, I can go higher.
Yeah.
But I've only ever seen over 180 that one time.
Right.
But it was real because there was definitely like incremental steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't just like a spike. And it was the same heart rate monitor I'd been using. It was very quite accurate. But if someone was to ask me, I think it'd be like 178, 179.
Yeah. Well, and I love this because really it doesn't matter, but what does matter, and this is where both you and I are doing, is looking at race history and say, oh, okay, this is what I ran. Let me look at the heart rate for that 70.3 or this full or this sprint. And that tells me what heart rate I need to be looking for. If we are going to compare to each other, that's where we want to try to figure out this normalized value to heart rate max. But like you, what's max? It's like max for now. What's max in 2 weeks or 3 weeks? It's going to change. And so that's a little harder, but it doesn't have as much meaning for me as an athlete. It's more, what is the heart rate that I can sustain is more important than knowing it relative to some max heart rate value.
Well, and the thing is, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. Is it's what you can sustain. But I got to be honest with you, in a full Ironman, I can sustain a higher heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
My legs can't handle it.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah,
right. Even in a half Ironman, 150, I could for sure hold 150 for 5 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I could hold 150. I think I could hold 155. The limiter is not my cardiovascular system.
yeah, yeah. Right, right.
The limiter is my legs.
Yeah.
Right. And whereas even in a sprint race,
Mm-hmm.
the limiter is always my legs.
Yeah.
It's never, I can't, I can't get in anymore. And it's interesting. Like I did that bike race on Wednesday night, and I basically was a time trial by myself for most of it. And same thing, like I was breathing pretty hard, but it was my legs that were the thing that just wouldn't spin over anymore. And
Yeah.
I think I got to 167, 168. But on the same kind of thing indoors,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be higher.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And part of it was being in the time trial position versus sitting up. And that's another factor.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it on the bike, like the position matters.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces of it. And I think that, you've probably read a lot of this stuff too. It's looking at the percentage of your max that where your threshold is.
Hmm.
And you want your threshold to be as high as you can be as far as the percentage of your maximum, really.
Yeah. I love it. And this takes me back to our previous episode or a couple episodes before we were talking about fatigue and ultimate exhaustion. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's like, well, I can sustain 147 for a sprint race. Why can't I use that for 70.3?
Yeah,
Why can't I use the heart rate for an iron distance? And it's just that you can't sustain it. And it's not necessarily the heart that's slowing us down. And remember,
exactly.
heart rate is only telling us in what we want to know is really what's happening energy system wise. And it's telling us it's a good correlate to rate of oxygen consumption. And that's really what we want to know. But that alone is not the limiting factor to endurance exercise. And so, yeah, it's not how fast the heart beats that's holding us back.
Not at all. Like,
Plenty of capacity there.
yeah, think about it. If you're even, let's say, I don't know, you're doing your half Ironman or your Ironman and you bonk,
Yeah, right.
not a heart and lungs thing. That's a glycogen thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You don't
yeah.
have enough sugar. It has nothing to
Yep.
do with the ability for your heart to contract.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or if you cramp, right?
Yep.
Last Ironman I did at mile 23, I'm cramping and I'm walking.
Yeah.
So my heart rate's 105, 110.
Yeah.
That's definitely not the limiter. The limiter is my
Right.
legs are locked up.
Yep.
Right. So I think you're absolutely right. So as far as like the original question, what's your average heart rate during a run of a full Ironman? It's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. Right. Or it's personal. It's my heart rate, and I know what heart rate I can sustain for a marathon portion of the event because I can look at my race history and I can say, oh, this was what I was doing, and I know if I go above this rate, then I'm going to start paying the price somewhere, and so I need to be in this range as I'm running, and I can look at that and I can still check that in. And same thing on a 70.3. I know what my range should be or can be, and I just keep checking it. Of course, you got to adjust it based upon, conditions and all that, heat and what have you.
But I would still contend that, okay, let's say it's super hot,
Yeah.
right? And humid.
Mm-hmm.
And this has happened to me, like racing in Miami
Yeah.
and racing in Chattanooga and racing in really hot places.
Yeah.
So my heart rate now goes to 160 instead of
Mm-hmm.
150.
Right.
But my legs are the limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
What I need is a monitor on my legs,
Mm-hmm.
right? That because it's, once again, it's not a heart rate I can sustain.
Yeah.
It's a leg issue,
Yeah.
muscular fatigue issue,
Even a mental fatigue issue.
mental fatigue issue.
Yeah.
It's not a heart rate.
Yeah.
The heart rate's not the limiter. But now we use this as a correlate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that at 150 or whatever, in a sprint race, that you can withstand, your legs can withstand that.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting you say this because now I'm thinking back to how I use it during a race, and it is more, you know, I as you know, I race more by feel,
I
and my perceived
do.
exertion. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be running and I've got that perceived exertion. I'm like, okay, this is what I can do, and I can look down at my watch and I say, oh, maybe I can do a little bit more, or maybe I can't. That's where I'm at. And so it's sort of this tool to look at, but I certainly don't shoot for a specific heart rate, other than like in a sprint race, I may say, "Oh, come on, you can go
Wow.
a little bit harder.
Come
You
on.
can go a little bit harder."
So for me, honestly, pace is way more important.
Yeah.
Like, even as a coach, I don't prescribe heart rates on a run
Mhm.
of a long distance race. I prescribe a pace,
Yeah. Right. Right.
because the pace, once again, it's a theory that I have, is it's your legs that are holding you back.
Hmm.
If you've been training to race at a certain pace,
Yeah.
that's what you need to go with. And same thing. Like, if I, let's say, take in 200 or 300 milligrams of caffeine on the bike,
Hmm.
my heart rate will be higher.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Right. I don't take in 200 or 300 milligrams before I do a training run.
Right. Hmm.
Right. And then anxiety, and your family's out there, and there's all these other things that can exogenously increase your heart rate. So yeah, that's my thought on it. But
Oh, I love it. We're not going
okay.
to get very far here. We got one
No,
question.
no. So you pick the next question.
All right. Well, I'll just go in order here. And that question was answered by Jan Ferdino. And what's interesting is if you go into each one of these questions, then other pros answer the same question. So they have one answer here, and then they have others. All right, so this next one is to Lucy Charles Barclay. How many miles or meters do you swim, run, and bike a week?
This is a very much, it depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm not injured
Yeah.
and I am taking the average of the year, because I think you have to take the average,
Yeah.
right? Because we build and then we drop and we build and we drop. So I'm gonna say on average 9K per week swimming
Yeah.
for me. Oh, she did hours per week bike. I'm just gonna give Ks, or I'll give miles. So 200 miles a week
Yep.
biking, and running. Oh man, I'm gonna give you my last year,
Yeah.
and then I'll give you what I would like to do.
Okay.
Last year, 10K per week in the
Okay.
last 365 days.
That, wait, say it again?
10 kilometers per week.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
No, I'm 100% serious. I looked at this. That's my average distance for the last 52 weeks.
Wow.
What I'd like it to be,
Mhm.
I'd like it to be 30 miles a week. That's
Mhm.
when I'm racing well and
Yeah.
I'm running well, it's 30 miles a week.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good number to shoot for, and that's still a lot for a triathlete. Like even Lucy answered, she does 50 to 60 kilometers a week is what she shoots
So
for.
that's 30 to 50
That's
miles.
right. That's right in that same range, or right around what you're talking about. So, and that can still be a lot because you've got to do the swim and the bike on top of that. I think she was also describing a 30-hour training week. So,
Yeah.
that's quite a bit.
But she's doing 30 up to 30 kilometers swimming per week. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
doing that.
yeah. Right, right.
Okay, so how about you?
All right, so like you, it depends, and what time of year, where we are relative to a race. I'll do if I'm getting ready for a 70.3 or even an Ironman. They're not that much different for me. I do about 12,000 to 15 yards a week in swimming. When I'm maintaining, it's probably down around 10 to 12 pretty consistently. And then on the bike, if I'm throughout the year, I'm probably around 150 as an average per week. But once we get close to race, I like to be well over 200 a week. And then for running, in my sort of build area where it's just sort of sustaining, I'll be somewhere around 20 miles a week. But I do like to get above 30, and if possible, to try to get a week or two of 40 miles a week. But that's not always possible.
No. And then obviously it's different if you're preparing for an Ironman or you're
Yeah,
preparing for a shorter race. For me, the real difference if I'm preparing for an Ironman or a longer race is more running.
yeah, totally.
The bike and the swim tends to stay pretty close.
Yeah, and I do keep a 1 day of running in the water to augment the mileage
Yep.
without having any added stress.
Let me ask you, John, when you do running in the water, I think we've talked about this before, like how do you measure it?
I just go by time.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
purely time. And what do you look for? Like 30 minutes, 40 minutes
I'm
session?
usually my base run in the water is 20 minutes, but I will work it up to a 30 minute, maybe a little bit longer, but it's so boring.
You wear a belt?
I do not. No, I do it right at the end of my swim, and I just turn around and I'll do 3 different techniques of running in the water. Each length I switch it up just to keep it sort of fresh. And
Okay. Well, maybe we can do a remote one day and you could teach us how to run in the water.
yeah, I really I've been researching running in the water since the 90s,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of value to it when you use it right. I mean, there's anecdotes like Tim O'Donnell, ran with body weight support, running in the water and with the treadmill that supports you, prior to his Ironman where he was second or third place overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. And so that's all the running he was doing going into that Hawaii Ironman. So there's a lot of anecdotes like that, and there is evidence that it does work, but it's just it's not easy.
All right. Next question I'll ask you. What's been the best purchase under $100 that has positively impacted your life?
Yeah. I love that question because triathlon tends to be an expensive sport. So there's not a lot of things that we buy under $100. But here's some things that I wrote down when I saw that question, just thinking about it. Zip ties,
Yep.
electrical tape. Uh, Actually, I like getting. We were talking about cold races. Having like I go get tube socks before the race, and I cut the toes off, so then I have arm warmers that I can throw away. So those are my under $100 items that came to mind when I saw that question. How about you?
Well, here's the, I took it a little different. It says impacted your life, not
Okay.
necessarily triathlon.
Zip ties impact my life. I
There
use
you
them all
go.
over the place.
There you go. So this is gonna sound completely weird, but sleep masks.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and they're cheap, like, like
Yeah.
$10, but ever since I started sleeping with a sleep mask, that has been a positive thing for me.
Mm.
And it's obviously way less than $100. Now, if we maybe change that, John, and say, how about something less than $100 that's impacted, you think is bang for your buck for triathlon?
Mhm.
Would that change your answer?
Well, hmm, under $100, bang for the buck. I don't know, having good tires, but tires are not under $100.
Oh, you can get, well, what kind of
Maybe
tires do you
one,
run?
maybe one tire.
The GP5000s are $49 right now. So
Oh,
you can get
really?
two,
Oh,
you can get
okay.
two for 100.
There you go. That's your, I think that's your biggest bang for the buck right there for under $100 is for speed is that. Running shoes are not under $100 anymore.
No, I would say the tires would be my answer as well. Or, for us, I think we both race with latex tubes still.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So latex tubes, but I think that the tires, I would go with the tires as well.
Hmm.
All right.
Okay, next one. Oh, let me see where my questions just went away. I know I wrote them down on my um, document, but they're out of orders. Okay.
I can read it.
No, I got it. Oh, I love this one. We've had this one before. Socks or no socks for the 70.3 and Ironman run.
Okay. Socks. Uh,
Period.
period. And not just for the run, for the bike too.
Same pair of socks or you change?
Uh, I have a set in T2 if I need them,
Okay.
only because at the 70.3 Worlds 2 years ago, we got it in that torrential rainstorm on the bike,
Okay.
and my feet were just soaked through.
Yeah.
And I got to T2 and I didn't have socks, and I
Mm.
chose not to wear socks, which was the right move. Like rather than just putting soaking wet socks into my shoes. Um, but then again, it poured on the run too, so my socks would have been wet.
I know.
But and it's interesting, like I'm very particular about those socks too. So I have my race socks,
Okay.
and it's actually sad. They're almost dying. It's been like 4 years, and I'm
Oh
like,
boy.
I gotta find those exact socks again because
Oh,
they're like
yeah.
money. They go on easy. I like them. They're comfortable.
Uh,
But yeah, and I know friend of the show, Rick, is gonna be lament us, and you guys, you need to train without socks on. But I'm definitely in the sock camp.
yeah.
How about
Um,
you?
okay, so you said you would change socks based upon rain or weather like that. Any other reason why you would have a pair of socks to change into for the run?
No, not for me.
Okay.
How about you? Oh, and then
Um,
just so you know, sprint and Olympic race, no socks.
yeah, yeah. Sprint, Olympic, depending on the course, but sprint definitely no socks. Olympic is sort of borderline depending on I don't know what I guess the course, if you will, or if I feel like I'm going to have time to put them on. But I tend not to wear socks in the Olympic. But 70.3 and fulls, yes, definitely socks.
Oh, if there's gravel on the road at
Yeah,
all when
yeah,
you
yeah,
run,
yeah,
always, even maybe in a sprint race, if there's a lot of, like, if you have to run on a path with a lot of gravel,
yeah.
getting those little tiny rocks, the socks
Mhm.
do provide that little bit of
Yeah,
protection.
that's right. And I'll do the same thing. I'll put a pair of like if we have the T2 bags and all that, I will do a pair of socks both in T1 and T2
Yeah.
just to have just in case. You never know. I mean, maybe spill something while you're biking and all of a sudden your socks are filled of Gatorade or something, and you want to be able to switch them out before you start the run.
Okay.
All right.
Next one. What do the fastest triathlon bikers have in common?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I listened to a few of the pro answers, and they were sort of all over the map in terms of that. What do they have in common?
And let's
One,
talk about age groupers for this. So not
oh,
pro.
we're age
So in
groupers.
your, yeah. So when you see the age groupers out there and you've talked to them,
I do, and one of the pros talked about this. Number one is a good position. And you can see it. I mean, I love even flipping through pictures, after the race of a lot of people, and you say, "Oh, that's a good position. That's a good position." Just from a still picture, you can pick up some things, not everything, but you can also pick up bad positions. And you look at some, and you're like, "Well, that looks uncomfortable." That's hard to do that. So I would say the faster age groupers, and pretty much predominantly most of the pros have a really good bike fit.
I'm going to say that the good bikers take care of the little things aerodynamically,
Yeah, right.
right? They wear an aero helmet.
Hmm.
Their suits are nice and snug, right? They don't have nothing's flapping around. The front ends of their bikes are super clean,
Very clean. Yeah.
right? They're maybe wearing shoe covers or,
Mhm.
just all of the little things. They've got an aero chain ring.
Yeah.
They all ride a disc.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
everything, like, it's so interesting. Like, I can be, I can produce less power now than I did 10 years ago, but I've taken care of all of those little things and I can go almost as fast.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's purely, in my opinion, it's aerodynamics
Yeah.
and really, really thinking about what's the aero penalty of every little thing.
Yeah.
The fastest bikers do that.
Right. Right. No, I love it. And I know when we've gone to races together, we both like walking by the pro pit and
Yep.
looking at their bikes and their setup. And well, oh yeah, that's interesting. I think
But
that's
some of them aren't good. That's the
yeah.
other thing.
Some of them aren't good. You're
And it's like, you're a pro. Like,
right.
why do you have this cable hanging? Why is this tie hanging like that? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like little things.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, that's really an odd
Yeah.
choice.
Well, and I think there was a race, I don't remember which one it was, but we had both gone to transition at different times and both saw the tape that pros were using to tape a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
that
And
was
I walked
70.3
away from
worlds.
that and I'm like, oh, I need to do that.
My front end is so much better now because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to tell people this, but I am slippery fast right now. Like, because my power is not nearly as good as it used to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm
Right.
producing almost the same times off
Yeah.
of less power.
Yeah.
And I attribute it all to that thought process of like,
That's
and
great.
to the point where, like, I used to have like a bolt hanging down from like a water bottle cage I had in front, and I got in out of the Dremel and I shaved the little bolt end off, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's, cost benefit. Is it a half watt? It's still a half watt,
Right. Right.
right?
Hmm.
And the fast bikers, they take care of that
I
stuff.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. No, I think you're right. That attention to detail is probably really important.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Let's see. Oh, no.
oh, did you lose it?
What, no, what cycling shoe do you wear for, oh, okay, this isn't the one. All right, what cycling shoe type do you wear for 70.3, 140.6, triathlon or road shoe? And why?
Okay. I used to always wear a triathlon shoe,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to switch to road shoes, not because I want to, but triathlon shoes, nobody makes a wide triathlon shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get older,
Yep.
your feet get wider. This is a fact. Your
Mm-hmm.
forefoot gets wider as you get older. And I think that this companies that are making these shoes are ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
These triathlon shoes are so narrow in the front that nobody, in my opinion, nobody over 45 can really wear one.
Right, right.
And who's got the money in triathlon? It's all these people over 45 that are willing to spend
Yeah,
three or
right,
four
right.
dollars on a pair of bike shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been forced, not happily, to wear road shoes, which sucks because they're harder to get on, they're harder to get off. I would much prefer to wear a triathlon shoe, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
can't find one with a wide enough forefoot.
Hmm.
that's a higher end, like, because I want a carbon sole
Yeah, right.
shoe. So that's my little complaint.
Mm.
Um, that's how that, and that's the same for any distance race. It's just
Yeah. Well, and
how
the
it
good
is.
thing is if you can fit into a tri shoe, they are much more comfortable now than 10,
Yeah,
15 years ago.
true.
And they are pretty close to comfort to a road bike. I mean, one of the road bike shoe, one of the advantages on the road bike shoe is you can tighten down more of the toe area, and which is why they can make them a little wider. You can tighten it down a little better, so you have this nice fit as you're cycling. So I'm the same way. I'll wear a tri shoe for a sprint and an Olympic, but for a 70.3 and a full, I wear my road shoes with the BOA connector to tighten things down.
So if and when we own a shoe company, we're going to make triathlon shoes that are, we'll call them senior triathlon shoes. So for older people with wide four.
Yeah. And I do the same thing. I wear wide shoes too, but oh, I don't have it up here. But that is our next product idea is a shoe redesign. So I've already started modifying a shoe. So
All right, I love it.
we're gonna we're gonna talk with John.
Yes.
So yeah, no, okay, so that's good. So mostly tri shoes for sprint Olympic for both of us, and road shoes begrudgingly from you for 70.3 and full, and definitely for me for 70.3 and full. All right, are you next?
I'm asking, I think.
Okay.
So do you measure HRV and or resting heart rate? If so, how do these metrics influence your training for the day?
All right, I'm guilty. I don't measure it and I don't use it. I do look at my resting heart rate, and I do sort of keep track of that.
Well,
Uh,
that's a question, and or resting heart rate.
yeah. And so resting heart rate, I do. I do not do HRV, and I probably should. I think it's a good measure. Everything I've read about it, it's a good measure. Early on, it was a hard measure to get accurately with devices like watches and what have you, or even heart rate strap monitors. But I think now there's a lot more better technology and algorithms to get that HRV. So I think it has a little better meaning, and it's a little more accurate now than 5 years or 10 years ago. But I never really got into the habit of using it for that reason. But I do want monitor my resting heart rate. My resting heart rate can get right around 40 for the most part. I know if things are sort of stressed or if I don't sleep well for a few nights, it starts to creep up, and I try to watch that.
So I got to do it right now. So and see, this is why I don't do this stuff, because
Yeah,
I um I wear an Aura ring, and I've worn an Aura ring for 5 years,
yeah.
and it's to the point now where I don't even check.
It's wet.
I don't even check it anymore.
Yeah. Right,
It's
right.
been 2 days since I've actually checked it.
Okay.
So I got a lot of information early on, and I
Hmm.
learned a lot about myself and about
Right.
my sleep habits and my body, and it's so interesting. Like, now I just go off of like how I feel. Like,
Yeah. Right.
RPE to me is way more important. Like, if I actually, I kind of have some rules of thumb. So if I don't sleep well for 2 nights in a row,
Hmm.
I don't train.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what my HRV says. Like, if I like, I know if I don't sleep well. If I don't
Right.
sleep well one night, I'm fine. I just continue to
Hmm.
go and train. Um, I know that it can help predict sickness.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but the funny thing is, it's only been retrospective, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
one day before your heart rate variability is low, and then the next day you're sick.
Hey, it's too late.
But it's too. The interesting thing is, there's so many other reasons why
Yeah.
HRV could be low for one
Yeah.
day. Um, so yeah, it's really an interesting thing, that because I measure it every day, but I
Hmm.
don't pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think the other thing is to recognize when the device is not working. Like I just looked at my watch and it says 81. And it's like there's no way my heart rate's 81 right now. I mean that actually is a high heart rate for me even
oh yeah.
exercising. So
Well,
uh,
maybe we're just so stimulated, because like I'm 68 and just sitting
yeah.
here, normally I'd be 56.
No, but now it
So,
dropped down to 52. So,
oh, never
that's
mind.
the thing is that it does this. And so, you know, we, a lot of times we need to be careful not to get sucked into, the monitor. And so when I used to work at cardiac rehab, one of the nurses I worked with, Rick would say, because I'd look at the EKG machine, because we're monitoring these people exercise, and I'm looking at the EKG machine, that they're wearing for exercise. So you start to pick up anything that might be going on. And he goes, "Hey, John," he's a nurse. He's been doing this for a while. And he goes, "Don't treat the monitor, treat the patient."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, that sounds like really good information." And it is, because sometimes, the one of the sensors would come off and the heart rate would just look crazy on the EKG. Print it, print it, print it. And you look over and the person's fine.
Yeah.
He says, treat the person, not the monitor. And I think we've fallen into that trap because we got Strava, Training Peaks, we got this device, that device. At the end of the day, you do need to figure out yourself and how you can calibrate your effort. And I think the tools are helpful to get to that. But at the end of the day, you gotta
Well, and like I said, I used to
yourself.
pay very close attention to it. And once
Yeah.
again, I think that I've learned
Yeah, right.
what it feels like when
Yep.
I'm not
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
And I've also feel like when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. Like the world is in trouble today because I'm ready to go.
Uh-huh.
Then that's, and I don't need the HRV measurement to tell me.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. All right, your question's next.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm noticing that these questions are in different order than when I looked earlier. So this is, I did not look at this question. So this is a good one. What is the best body position for power out of the saddle? That's a weird
So
question. Yeah.
it is a weird question. So I actually watched a training video from EF Education First, whatever, cycling team, and they brought in some age groupers basically into their training camp in Girona this winter.
Okay.
And they were teaching how to climb out of the saddle. And I actually learned quite a bit about this, and it actually does matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't describe it exactly how they were doing it, but basically was they wanted you to lean forward
Mm-hmm.
and really use your upper body.
For climbing only, you're talking
For
about.
climbing out
Yeah,
only.
yeah.
So, because this is power out of the saddle, I assume that means you're climbing, because in a triathlon,
Mm-hmm.
I don't go out of the saddle unless I'm climbing.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
I only for stretching out, like if I'm like,
Yeah.
like
Then you're
Indian
not looking for
Wells.
power. You're not looking for power then.
Yeah, yeah. Indian Wells is such a flat course. I'll actually stay in arrow with my arms and climb out of the saddle just a little bit, just to stretch out. But no, definitely, you're right for climbing.
So I think that it's honestly, my advice on this one would be to actually practice it a lot, right? Because we've talked about this before as well, as like, find the best position for yourself, but
Yeah.
and really use your upper body and use your body weight. The
Yeah.
idea of climbing out of the saddle, and this was from that video, was that you actually want to swing the bike underneath you
That's it.
and utilize your body weight to push the pedals down, and your arms are a big part of that transfer of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because, like, John, you and I are both, we've talked about this before, we really enjoy climbing out of the saddle. Like,
I'm an out of the saddle kind of guy.
yeah, me too. Like,
Yeah.
you give me a 5-minute climb, I'll be out of the saddle the entire 5 minutes,
Yep.
Especially in triathlon, because I want to change my position.
Right.
So
So I love this question because it's really good, and there is there is a preference, and some people do prefer to be in the saddle. Now you do need to be thinking about what gear ratios that you have available, what you can how you can spin going up a hill versus being out of the saddle. I'm much more comfortable climbing out of the saddle. I think it's partly because I'm a little heavier too, but there is a preference, and you do need to figure out what that is. But when we're racing up at Sand Hollow, going up that first big hill, I'm out of the saddle almost the whole way. Or coming up, from Boulder Beach and Pumpkin Man, once the hill starts, I'm probably once you get in that wash area, I'm out of the saddle almost all the way up to the top. So but it is a practice thing too. But this is where some interesting physics come into play. And we know that we measure power on cycling because it's a good predictor of rate of oxygen consumption. And we know that that mechanical power that we're measuring at the bike is very similar to the aerobic power that we're seeing internally, like we hooked ourselves up to a VO2 system. And so power is how fast you're transforming energy from one form to another. Typically we're doing chemical to mechanical. But when we're climbing, that is changing it a little bit. We're transforming energy from a potential energy, which is based upon what you said, based upon the weight of the person, and we're transforming that to kinetic energy, which is the movement energy. And so that's where when you're climbing out of your saddle and you see 500 watts or whatever it is, that doesn't mean 500 watts of VO2. That's not
Right.
aerobic power, because now you've mixed in chemical and mechanical transfer of energy to kinetic energy. So sorry, it's a
No, it's
physics
true.
problem.
No, I
But
think
this is why when you're doing a test on the bike, like if you're doing an FTP test or you're doing a graded exercise test on the bike indoors, you want to stay in the saddle the whole time, because once you go out of the saddle, you change the relationship between mechanical power and aerobic power.
let me ask you, let me follow up on that.
Yep,
If I'm doing a VO2 max test
yep.
and I'm measuring my gas in and gas out, why does standing change anything? Like
In terms
why
of
would,
VO2,
yeah.
well, that is now becoming a weight-bearing exercise.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is if I'm trying to find my VO2 max,
Right.
right, and I'm using that VO2 max to
No,
help.
but VO2 max, you can find getting out of the saddle.
Okay.
Power,
Oh, I got
once you're looking at power, that
oh,
power doesn't
I
have
got
the
what you're
same
saying. I thought you were
relationship.
saying because even VO2 max tests, they're like, oh, you
Oh,
should
yeah,
stay
no,
seated. I'm like, why? Like in a race, when I'm actually putting out,
yeah,
if I'm at, let's say 400 watts, by the time I get to my VO2 max,
yeah.
I'm
No,
standing at 400 watts,
right.
right? And so there were protocols that I read that said, this VO2 max test should be seated the entire time. I'm like,
Mhm.
that wouldn't be relevant to if I'm really trying to find out zones and, so I
Well,
get what you're saying. If I'm purely looking at power and trying, like, yeah, I agree.
yeah, once you get out of the saddle, that relationship between mechanical power that you're measuring at the bike is going to be different than with rate of oxygen consumption, aerobic power, than
Yeah.
if you're sitting. And that's because there's a transfer of energy from the potential, your weight, to push on the pedal, and that's not VO2. And so that's where you got to compartmentalize some of that information between the two different instruments.
Well, I'm going to be devil's advocate again then.
Yeah,
So if I am doing a 20-minute test for my
yeah.
FD and I do it on a climb.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I'm going and eventually I want to race this climb,
Oh, yeah, totally different. Yeah.
right? Then I want
Yeah.
to, I want
No,
to,
totally.
yeah, I want to mimic
Simulate your race conditions. Yeah.
exactly
No,
because I want
totally.
to, yeah, because I want to know how much power, like on my power meter, I'm actually seeing, and it doesn't matter if it's potential or
Yeah.
kinetic. Like that doesn't even matter. It's like
Yeah.
because I'm trying to figure out that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that if I'm trying to train for a race and a strategy, that's where you can take, if you have a portable VO2 system, do that at the same time,
Exactly.
your finger, and then, figure out what's the best way to get up that hill.
Yeah.
That's a different question than saying, oh, I want to use a graded exercise test to understand this relationship between power and VO2.
Yeah, got it.
That's where you want to maintain that seated position, only to get that, the most of
It's the relationship you're talking about.
that's right, to get that relationship out. That's what a lot of times that's what people are using that test for. No,
Okay, I like that too. So here's the
wait,
next
we
for
gotta go
you.
back. We got a question here.
Okay.
Terry asks, on my watch, it shows my heart rate. Do you recommend a heart rate strap or use the wrist heart rate monitor? You wanna
Okay.
go?
So yeah, we can. It's too bad we don't have Dr. Navalta on this. This is
Yeah,
so
right.
we have a colleague that actually studies this very thing.
He's done a lot of it. Yeah.
And okay, so Terry, this is complicated, but I'm gonna make it as simple as I can. On the bike, if you want to use your watch, it's probably pretty dang accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Running, it's probably pretty inaccurate.
Yeah.
And it's the movement of the watch
Mm-hmm.
on your wrist, and every time you hit the ground, you get a little shake,
Yeah.
and your watch moves just a tiny bit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's enough of an artifact to actually make it not very accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So wrist-based stuff for heart rate and running, not going to be very
Yeah.
good at all. but when they did the same research on a bike, even on a mountain bike, it was a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, you're spot on, and it doesn't matter on how tight you
mm-mm.
strap your watch on your wrist. So you're right, because it is the movement of the watch, not only relative to the ground, but relative to the skin as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, use the chest strap.
yeah. For running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I use it. I just put it on all the time because I yeah, the different algorithms for the different watches. Yeah, for exercise, your chest strap is your best device. But you're right, for cycling, because you're not moving that much in terms of the upper body, you can get away without it.
All right, John, I'm gonna ask you this question. Why don't you live in Hawaii? The next question was, why don't more professional triathletes live in Hawaii? I'm gonna ask you, John Mercer, why
I
do you not live in Hawaii?
I don't think I could live on an island for more than a year. I even though I'm guilty of biking the same bike route every day,
I was gonna say, like, this
running
is
the same run route
a
every
perfect
day.
thing for you.
I think, if I did move to Hawaii, I think I'd actually have to change sports. I don't think I'd be able to do triathlon as much because there's not as many triathlons there. They do have a tri club there, but yeah, no, it's mostly just being on an island. I don't know if I could do it. Like I lived in New York. I did not live down in Manhattan. I always said I could live in Manhattan for maybe 1 or 2 years because it's the same thing. You're locked into that space without being able to get out very easily. So yeah, I I think that's why. How about you?
I don't think I could live there at all. I love road trips
Yeah,
and
yeah,
driving places, and
no.
no, I I don't know anything I could live there longer than 2 weeks. Like seriously, it
Very
just
good.
for me, yeah, and I like to ride different places. In
Yeah,
Hawaii, there's very limited routes that you can
yeah.
ride.
Hmm.
I had a friend that he was a cyclist. He spent every summer in Hawaii. His family lived there,
Hmm.
and he'd ride the same route
Yeah.
every day around the whole
Hmm.
island of Oahu, like, and there was just very few safe places to ride.
Yeah.
And there's good running there though. There's a
Hmm.
lot of good options for running, and obviously, like, open water swimming, you could swim everywhere, so that
Yeah,
would be
that's
okay. But
right.
most of
You
us spend the most time training on a bike, so I think
gotta
that
understand
that would
the
limit that.
ocean a little bit more. Yeah, and I'm the same way. I mean, that's why living on an island would be tough because you've got to travel. You've got a big trip if you want to travel anywhere else off the island. So yeah, but it's beautiful, and 2 weeks is actually quite nice. I've enjoyed that. So, but you got to have the right spot. You got to be on the ocean to hear the ocean and all that type of stuff. So
All right, well, let's leave it there because that was a fun one.
yeah,
We'll end on the fun one. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and thanks Terry for that question. That was a good question. This was fun to answer these questions. I think we need to do an Ask Us Anything again. Just
yeah, yeah.
the Tri Club. Maybe we can figure that out. I think that'd be good.
Yeah, yeah, we can do that. That'll be good we'll post it and see what questions people have and yeah, I don't know how many questions we cover here. We only covered like 5 or 6, but
Exactly, but that's good. That's good.
oh, it's fun. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Dad. Good talking.
Welcome. Have a great weekend.
You too.